来宾大家午安，欢迎大家来参加2026网际网路传播治理论坛。Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to 2026 Internet Communications Governance Forum. 接下来这个场次的主题是技术社群与网路基础设施能力建构。Our next session is titled Technical Community and Infrastructure Capacity Building. 在这个场次当中，我们将探讨基础设施、基础设施如何去支撑网际网路的传播治理，来强化基础设施韧性，还有资讯传播的安全，并且透过技术能力还有国际参与，来提升台湾在全球网际网路治理当中的影响力。In this session, we are going to discuss how technical infrastructure supports internet communication governance, strengthens infrastructure resilience and information security, and helps Taiwan enhance its role in global internet governance through technical capacity and international participation. 这个场次的主持人是国家通讯传播委员会陈美静科长。The moderator for this session is Ms. Meijing Chen, Section Chief at NCC. I will now hand the floor to our moderator. 接下来就把时间交给主持人陈美静科长。科长有请。
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our forum. Since we arranged for the interpretation, so I'll speak in Chinese. Okay. 那大家好，我是国家通讯传播委员会。
Hello, everyone. My name is Chen Meijing. I'm a section chief with National Communications Commission. Welcome to the Internet Week 2026. As you can see, during this week, we have TWNIC, NCC, TWIGF, TWNOC. We have several different organizing committees, and over these 4 days, from infrastructure, artificial intelligence, digital trust, we cover a wide variety of topics. And in the morning, on the fourth floor in June 402, we have engaged one another in discussions about information war, misinformation, disinformation. And we realized once the Wi-Fi network is compromised, then accounts will be stolen and misinformation will become rampant. Therefore, these topics are touching upon a wide variety of issues. And last year, when I attended the IGF event, I realized that in recent years, scams and fraudulent activities are become an issue of concern. In addition to infrastructure, we also need to address the application layer. Therefore, I discussed with CEO Yu Ruofan of TWNIC. We believe that among our different forums, there are overlapping issues. During the opening ceremony, Mr. Wang Guowei was saying that that's why we wanted to come together. We want to address these issues from different perspectives. For example, technical issues, international experience, how to address problems at different layers. And I would like to introduce first our panelists. The first one is Mr. Alex Leong. He is from Akamai. He is someone with more than 20 years of industry experience. He deals with OTT streaming as well as assessment of the infrastructure. He received his degrees in both at Stanford and Harvard University of the United States. And the second panelist is a gentleman from Zhonghua Telecom, Mr. Deng Jiawei. He is committed the development of internet infrastructure. Especially, he focuses on how to make the transition from IPv4 to IPv6. He is currently an adjunct professor at Chang'an University. His research covers definition of the internet, 5G computing, and so on and so forth. And finally, we have a gentleman from Taiwan Mobile, Ko Zheng-yi, Director of System Design Division. He began to work for Taiwan Mobile in 1997, covering GSM 3G, 4G, 5G, as well as IDC system operation. And he is now currently responsible for planning for the development of a core network for the 5G communication network. And we will allocate 8 minutes for each panelist to make a short presentation, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. If you have any questions, please line up behind the standing microphone, which you can see in the middle aisle. You are welcome to address your question to any speaker. We also are opening our Slido platform for you to raise questions online. So without further ado, I would like to go to Alex.
好，这次谢谢大家。
Thank you so much. My name is Alex Liang. Today, I represent Akamai. We are the Taiwan branch of Akamai. This is a very good opportunity for me to interact with a lot of the industry leaders in Taiwan. We would like to address one very important topic. How can we elevate our technical capability in this in this AI era? I have prepared a slide deck. So I would like to show my slides. So as you can see, as reflected in the topic, from the beginning of the internet until now, we are talking about a multi-stakeholder community which has made internet possible. For example, we have ICANN, IETF, and APNIC, and they all have made significant contribution. That's why we have the internet as it stands today. So this requires more than just one single star, one single hero. Instead, it requires an entire community which supports the development of the internet. What do we mean by technical capability? The ability to build, operate, and evolve a system. That's what we mean by technical capability. So once you have experience in building and operating a network, then this can create a feedback loop because you can contribute to the experience and generate discussion with other stakeholders such as government agencies. So when it comes to technical capacity, there are three aspects: engineering, operational, and adaptive. Earlier, we talked about build, operate, and evolve. And engineering corresponds with build. In other words, you have the capacity, you have the ability to develop API. You can design the architecture, which part should be placed at the original data center and which part should be placed along the edge. So we need to go and see whether the team, do you understand what you are building? So with the advent of AI, some teams are choosing to take a shortcut, or they are becoming very impatient. Therefore, what has been carried out by AI agent are taken as what they do themselves. So previously, we need to go through a learning process, but now some of the learning has been outsourced to the AI agents. So this means that at the end of the day, sometimes we seem to have a lack of understanding of what we actually build. And then once something is built, you need to keep them in operation. For example, you need to observe the traffic, and there are different models of traffic management, how the system will respond to outlier situation at the event of disaster. How do you address issues such as failure or crisis? So this is a 24/7 type of observation that needs to be put in place. And adaptive capacity corresponds to evolve. In other words, whether we are capable of evolving our system with the passage of time. And obviously, in the internet environment, there will be different workloads. In recent years, in addition to traditional workload, we are seeing more and more AI-related workloads. And so how can we allocate different workloads to different distributed network nodes? For example, what workload needs to be placed at regional data center, and what workload should be placed, let's say, data centers which lend themselves to training different models. So we do need to make sure our system is equipped with that kind of intelligence. They should be able to allocate different resources for different workloads. I actually have a trade secret as an architecture designer. So many people want to remove bottlenecks from their system. But let me be honest with you, bottlenecks can never be eliminated. They will be shifting around. For example, once you get rid of one bottleneck, then the system will have to deal with the next bottleneck. Therefore, it's impossible to eliminate entirely all bottlenecks. Rather, what we need to do is to find the node where it is more cost-effective to deal and handle a specific bottleneck. Therefore, recently we are helping a client to deploy an AI image catalog search. For example, there is a picture of a piece of furniture, and once you upload this picture, then all similar furniture at one store will be shown. But the bottleneck is at the vector search. But we tried to move that particular workload to a place where GPU is present. So all of a sudden, vector search requires less than 1 millisecond, and embedding becomes the new bottleneck, because embedding generation is responsible for transforming the imagery to high-performance imagery vector. So this is a good example to show bottlenecks do shift from place to place. And when we talk about technical capacity building, with that example that I just showed you in mind, what we actually would like to encourage you to do is to see whether this community is able to engage in healthy debates. If it's impossible to eliminate entirely all bottlenecks. So normally when we engage in this type of discussion, it's all about trade-offs. We need to understand all the pros and cons of each proposal. Obviously, I cannot go into the details right now. The most important thing is not the answer at the end. Rather, whether or not within your community you have this type of culture, you are open to different opinions, and you do provide opportunities for open-minded discussions. So here in Taiwan, we do have some opportunities. Crisis is translated into 危机 in Mandarin. So 危机 is made up of two characters, one meaning crisis and the other meaning opportunities. Taiwan is advanced semiconductor products hub. We know that AI system has become part of critical infrastructure. Therefore, any critical infrastructure, when they get compromised, then this will present immediate danger to not only the society, but also people's trust in the government. For example, if there's a model mistaking honeybee as locust, then this will generate an agricultural crisis. And in terms of national defense systems, if Taiwan's local black bear is mistaken as Winnie the Pooh, sorry. If the Taiwanese black bear is mistaken as Winnie the Pooh, obviously in the national defense setting, this could become a national security threat. So that's why we believe we need to promote the concept security by design. If you do not engage in security by design, then you only achieve security by accident. So that I'll stop here.
很精彩。
Thank you, Alex, for your insightful sharing by addressing capacity building and how that can help us address the movement of bottlenecks, which will drive our resource allocation decisions. Our decisions should be configured accordingly by integrating this concept of security by design. And we'll probably have time to open the floor for some questions to the end. Now let's move on to Dr. Jiawei Zheng. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. So in my presentation today, I'm going to talk about network infrastructure resilience and information security. I think the dissemination of information plays an important role at events like today's. But today I try to approach this topic from a macro perspective. So to begin with, we now have this dual layer structure of digital operations, but most users only focus on the up layer, but the bottom layer is still the foundation so that service providers, ISPs, can actually provide services to ensure that services on the top layer can run smoothly. But actually, if we take a look at the bottom physical layer from the base station, switching, routing equipment, data centers, backbone network to submarine cables, we see this is a very comprehensive physical infrastructure. So we now go beyond a submarine cable to microwave or satellite technologies, all of which play an important role in this infrastructure. But submarine cables can support more volume of traffic than other options. Now, what is meant by network resilience? Well, resilient means that when the unlikely event of crisis does occur, we can immediately deal with the emergency and go back to normal without suffering from tremendous impact. So in the past, we only focused on system reliability. Take Taiwan, for example, we are prone to natural disasters. These are truly unavoidable. So from the perspective of reliability, we now change our mindset into having a resilience or contingency plan in place so that we can actually enhance the resilience rather than just reliability of our systems. But how can resilience be truly realized? First, we need to have redundancy, not only physically, but also in terms of routing and computing. In terms of services, we need to have decentralized deployment with multi-path, multi-node design to prevent a single point of failure from destroying the entire system. In the event of a abnormality or disruption, we also need to enable auto failover, and also we need to have monitoring capabilities so that we can reduce disruption to services without delay and reduce impact to other services being provided. Now, about the dissemination of information. So, of course, we need to ensure the timeliness, credibility, accuracy, and integrity of such transmission. Because the security of information actually goes beyond traditional confidentiality concerns. It's now being spread online in multicast. There are multiple sources of information. So we need to have some basic safeguard or guardrails to ensure that the four pillars of information transmission can be safeguarded. These are some of the typologies of threats, from physical and human threats. For example, in Taiwan, we are no stranger to natural catastrophes. Environmental disaster, but some of the disasters are man-made, such as construction projects. And there are also systemic malicious attacks. For example, cyber attack, network paralysis, malware. These are system-oriented attacks. But now we also see the emergence of cognitive and dissemination manipulation, especially AI-enabled deepfakes being spread in cyberspace, which might cause social unrest. According to the 2025 WF Global Risk Report, what tops the chart is regional armed conflict. For example, as reflected in the crisis in Middle East and the Russian-Ukraine war. And you can see that in the next 2 years, information and disinformation and cyber espionage will move up the rankings. And we definitely need to be well prepared to guard ourselves against those risks. Now, in terms of dissemination and misinformation, we talked about the concept of echo chamber. For example, people in the similar age group may actually share certain preferences or biases against certain events. And these biases will be deepened because of algorithmic preferences. Now, when cyber attacks cross physical boundaries, it may pose a threat to physical layer of the internet, thereby undermining the resilience and security of the internet. So how can we really realize network resilience? As I said, in addition to redundancy and device integration, for government and operators, they need to have sets of guidelines to fall back on to guide their monitoring and recovery. Now, in terms of safety for information dissemination, we need to have real-time fact-checking capability. We need to cite authoritative sources such as our fact-checking center, fraud prevention center. We also need to ensure platform governance, which calls for the general public to really identify true information from false ones. After all, there are actually multiple sources of information that we rely on a day-to-day basis. Now, in the AI era, I think we see AI can serve as a useful tool, as a threat, and also as a good defense tool. So, regardless of which sides you are from, I think it is important for people to cultivate their awareness. For example, a lot of people use AI to strengthen their defense capabilities. So it is using magic to beat magic, as we say. Last but not least, we need to build a trustworthy and resilient digital society. Of course, it is built not only on a robust internet infrastructure, but also on ISPs, governments, and the general public. So that is why public awareness and outreach will go a long way towards building a trustworthy and resilient digital society. That's all for my part. Thank you, Dr. Zheng Jiawei. I think we are joined by some friends who have been staying here since this morning. I think we echo a lot of topics talked about this morning. As Dr. Zheng mentioned, we have the infrastructure layer, physical layer, to the application layer, and he also provided a tentative definition of resilience and how that can help us respond to contingencies and how we can use AI to combat AI-oriented risks. So the reason why we want to co-host this week's event by TWNIC, TWNOC, and TWAGF is exactly because of this. We actually can address a variety of topics. Now, moving on, we'd like to hear from Dr. Bill Ko, Director of the System Design Division from Taiwan Mobile. So Director Ke will also talk about the system perspective and how we can enhance system-level resilience. There might be some overlap with some previous speakers, but he will share about some local experiences. Thank you, moderator. Yeah, please share my slides. Yes, in this session, we're going to talk about technical community and infrastructure capacity building. And my topic today is building a resilient and secure digital physical defense line. So let's provide a definition first. We have two layers in question. We are talking about information dissemination security and communication governance. But here's my definition. We have two layers, the overlay and the underlay. So we telecom providers focus on the underlay. As Dr. Zhe mentioned, we are installing cables, providing core networks, IDC or IP networks. In the event of disruption to underlay, in the event of system shutdown at our telecom stations, then everything on the overlay will become useless or will fail. And I think when it comes to information governance or security, we need to address these issues from the three layers. The first one is content layer, followed by the middle platform layer, and the bottommost infrastructure layer. Now, for content layer, telco companies actually have no direct control over the content, but when it comes to platform, most telco companies have started to introduce their own platforms. For example, we have the M+ platform, and some meeting-oriented software. So usually, telecoms do have certain control over or contribution to the platform level or the infrastructure layer. So contents can be moderated, platform can be monitored, but the infrastructure layer needs to be very resilient. Now let's start from the bottommost layer, the infrastructure layer. So from the perspective of sovereignty or governance, now let's say whether it's cloud or mist, basically it is very close to us, not far up in the sky. So your cloud, your mist, or your infrastructure, critical infrastructure, should remain in your close proximity so that you can exercise control. So don't think that the cloud, the mist are really high up in the sky. It's not out of reach. You need to be localized, because without localized infrastructure, then they can really not be very effective. Not to mention, if you want to focus more on delivering high-quality content or platform, your devices infrastructure needs to be disaster-proof. For example, you need to have Tier 3 or Tier 4 facilities with multi-redundancy capabilities and multiple power supply sources. And for the government, they need to send clear regulatory boundaries. For example, which areas can government exercise its control with clear definitions. Of course, we are a telecom company, so this is actually what we do on a day-to-day basis. When you are designing a telecom facility or designing your platform or your household, we uphold several principles. In the design phase, you need to consider the following factors. And in the construction phase, you need to conform to certain KPI standards and so forth. So first one is power, telecommunications, water need to be introduced through dual paths. A lot of people actually champion this idea, but the pipelines, there's only one single pipeline. But usually you need to have two pipelines, two sides, coming from two sides. And you need to have power coming from two different power stations or substations, not to mention the addition of a generator. So do not only rely on one single generator or one single power source. And you need to have different paths for cold and hot aisles containment. And your equipment, UPS, everything need to be properly segmented. And you need to have fireproof compartment, and you have 200-year flood protection design together with cybersecurity certification and green and eco-friendly. That's some of the principles as we go about designing our telecom main data center. Now that's the bottommost layer. What about the middle layer, the platform layer? So I'll share a couple of examples with you. This is DDoS attacks. So they are engineered by AI. And I talk about tsunami level DDoS in the TBPS era. If I remember correctly, the largest scale attack actually comes in 2 to 3 T. But you know what's the scale of the Internet of Taiwan? In totality, it's about 30 Ts. So one attack will actually exhaust a tenth of the totality of the Internet. So actually, no single telco provider can withstand such an attack, with the exception of Chunghwa Telecom. So this kind of large-scale attack actually will bring devastating impact. Sometimes DDoS attacks can be very targeted in terms of specific IPs or users. So it is able to actually take down websites, certain content, leading to collapse in public trust, or some people actually become they are impersonated by malicious actors.
So let me begin with how we can protect ourselves against DDoS. Here in Taiwan, basically what we will do is we will look to countries such as Japan, Hong Kong, the United States, and Singapore. In other words, we will be working with those 4 countries: Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the US. For example, given the recent DDoS, so 3T of my capacity were attacked. Then I will tell the US and Hong Kong, please help discard traffic that was coming our way. They were coming to Taiwan. And so, especially if they didn't do the blocking in Hong Kong or the US, then for telecom company need to find a way to block the incoming traffic from coming into your household, right? So if overseas companies are able to block 70% of the traffic, and then you block another 20% from going into household, and then if you have your own website, you also need to come up with your own protection. In other words, in the case of DDoS attacks, this requires a global collaboration. So I think this has already been mentioned. DDoS requires global collaboration. Otherwise, we will be experiencing existential threat. Phishing is probably the biggest concern for you. But DDoS is probably the biggest threat for telecom companies such as ours. Phishing is designed to steal your personal information like a medical record or account information. In addition to scams, fraudulent activities, we oftentimes see cases where your geographical locations have been stolen. If that happens, then what will happen next is that your IP will also be stolen. And the type of telecommunication services that you have been using, GDCI, will also be stolen. As a result, social media or whatever app services you've been using, they will be used as a tool in order to defraud you out of your money. Therefore, as a platform operator and telecom company, our service makes sure you will be connected to the internet. But at the same time, we want to provide protection so that when you use whatever services, your services will not be interrupted as a result of disasters or attacks. But we cannot do the job alone. Especially if we want to improve cybersecurity, we really need to work hand in hand, in unison almost, in order to be effective in what we do. Therefore, as a platform operator, telecom company, we really need to be more proactive. We need to participate in international effort in order to wipe out scams, in order to fight against attacks. So that's how we can contribute to the development of the community. We can identify good selective defense mechanisms. Again, we really need to work as a team in order to make sure whatever communications we want to do, we can do that in a safe manner. Obviously, as government enacts regulations and tries to maintain digital sovereignty, we really need to set our boundary very clearly. So, in other words, we need to be clear about what our jurisdiction will cover, and this requires, again, collaboration among different sectors. For example, telecom company tried to absorb incoming attacks, and we try to work closely with platform operators at our digital centers. Not only we will protect our data centers physically, but also we will make sure no services will be interrupted. Without resilient infrastructure, there will be trustworthy network environment, and obviously there wouldn't be the realization of digital sovereignty. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. You mentioned DDoS as an example. Obviously, when DDoS attacks, the impact could be very far-reaching. If you have any questions, please line up behind the microphone that we have placed in the middle aisle. Before you raise questions, with the privilege given to the moderator, I do want to pose some questions to our panelists. When I engage Alex in private discussion, I had a question for him. But now I have another question inspired by the presentation made by Mr. Ke. You mentioned security by design. This is for Alex. So when you mentioned security by design, actually, when we look to other countries, how they tried to make their online environment safer. For example, in Australia, safety by design has been incorporated into their legal framework. In other words, what they do is not to wait until things have happened before they go in to respond. Rather, they try to be more proactive, try to prevent bad things from happening. This requires collective defense and sharing of information. Can you say something about that? And also, Mr. Ke mentioned DDoS attacks. Obviously, they really need to find ways to distribute traffic. Alex, you talk about the concept that bottlenecks will be shifting. Obviously, when we design architecture, there will always be some bottleneck point. So, how should you respond when you are under attack? Let me address your first question. Mr. Tan, Ms. Tan mentioned the case of Australia. They also have the same concept, security by design. They seem to have a different term. I forgot. Oh, I think it is security security first. Whether it is security first or security by design, they are quite similar. Given the modern day AI system, information system, they are an integral part of digital infrastructure. So security should be equated with how we protect our nuclear power plant or how we plan ISP's infrastructure. Well, I just give you a very extreme case. For example, an AI model mistakes honeybee as locust or mistakes Taiwan black bear as Winnie the Pooh. This will translate to major disasters. And both Mr. Ke and Mr. Zheng, I was listening very attentively to their presentation, and let us picture an apocalyptic scenario. Infrastructure is very important. Otherwise, apocalyptic scenario could come to pass. If an AI model is toxic itself, then this will obviously generate a lot of harm. For example, a toxic AI model could mistake honeybee for a locust. So even if you provide 99.99% reachability, then this will lead to even more honeybees being killed, right? Therefore, security by design is actually very, very important, much more important than we originally envisioned. In other words, we really need to make sure security is a key component of every stage of the life cycle. We also need to take a step back to look at the entire stack. We need to make sure every layer is secured. So if we can do that, then we can more holistically improve the security of the entire system. Because we are talking about technical community for our session. Community is made up of human beings, right? So there are people in the picture. Security by design is very relevant. because we are dealing with people within a community, what's their culture, whether they prioritize security, whether there's a feedback loop between the community and the government, whether there is any way for the community members to inform the government of changing trend of what is happening in the real world. I think what are some of the problems faced by ISP and so on and so forth. So I think that's also a very important consideration here. Again, if you want to enhance security, you really need to look to the cooperation between community and government. It requires more than just technology. We need to have a very clear division of labor. For example, a crisis happens. What is the responsibility for the government? What about ISP operator? What about CDN operators? And who has the ability to understand the problem and then to effectively step in? We talk about risks coming from not knowing what you are doing, right? In this AI era, increasingly the engineering community is not understanding what they're building.
当危机发生的时候，谁有那个责任？还有
So at the event of crisis, who has the ability to understand the problem so that they can come up with effective solutions? So internal communication is also very important within each team. What about the DDoS attacks in terms of the architecture you design? Especially you talk about battleship tend to shift from place to place. So how should we deal with DDoS attacks by beefing up the architecture? Mr. Ke talked about a tiered solution. And I think he had given a very good explanation. The first line of defense is CDN, and then we talk about at your doorstep. That's a different line of defense. But this has to do with the feedback loop that I just talked about. Because DDoS attacks first happened more than 10 years ago. Therefore, how should we deal with DDoS attacks? I think we know pretty much what we need to do. And we now already have a playbook, right? Obviously, the playbook will also be evolving with the passage of time. But at least we have some basic idea what we need to do. We have observed two trends which will be relevant for what we should be doing next in the future. The first trend I would like to share with you. Nowadays, AI will design and engineer attacks. Traditionally speaking, if you want to launch a DDoS attack, you probably need to work with crime organizations. You buy DDoS as a service from crime organizations. But now there are perfectly legitimate organizations that can help design a DDoS campaign for crime organizations. They will be able to do everything for you. And there's a trend of DIY DDoS campaign. So you don't need to pay Bitcoin to DDoS company to launch a DDoS attack. So that's something that we have observed. And a second trend. I remember Mr. Kerr was saying, in addition to traditional DDoS attack on layer 7, which is the API layer, it's actually easier to steal personal information using that particular API layer. Crime organizations, they do not do attack for the sake of doing attacks. there is always a commercial or business motive behind that kind of effort because they want to make a profit. You want to, cripple an ISP for a month. But if you are not able to glean any personal information, then ISP service will be interrupted and the general public will lose their trust in their ISP. But so what? However, if there are API loopholes and you can use loopholes to probably collect medical report or bank account information or personal data, birthday, or your NIH card number, NHI card number, and so on and so forth. Then for crime organizations, if there is a clear loophole within the API, then that's much easier than for us to launch an DDoS attack. So that's another trend that we have already observed.
Thank you very much. And another question for Dr. Zheng. Well, Alex mentioned the importance of critical infrastructure, especially its preparedness against external shocks or disasters. And you talked about some compound events that call for system redundancy. Now, take Taiwan. We are subject to typhoons or earthquakes or man-made attacks. So in terms of resilience consiliencies, we are going to better respond to this kind of event with multi-redundancy in place. Yes, of course, Taiwan is very vulnerable to natural disasters, say earthquakes or torrential rains leading to floods. So we need to have multi-node, multi-sequence, multi-path recovery capability, which will play a key role in the future of governance. So our policy toolkit should transform from a passive mindset to an active preparedness mindset. So, for example, we can integrate the resources across telcos or companies to make sure that critical services such as medical care and telecommunication can run smoothly in times of crisis to ensure continuity. So we hope that in compound scenarios, we can actually integrate sources across multiple platforms. For example, we can have something like a drills covering emergency response, telecom, and firefighting. For example, this afternoon, just at 4 p.m., we'll have a disaster alert SMS or cell phone notification test. So we want to make sure that these things can really come into help as we prepare for disasters. So we need to have relevant policies and tools in order to benefit all users. Thank you, Dr. Zhao Weizhen. Yes, thank you for bringing this up because at 4 p.m., all telco companies are going to have an emergency drill. So the alarm or the notification of your cell phones will probably go off in about 19 minutes time. So don't be alarmed by then. Now, how about Dr. Bill Ko? You mentioned about the nature of DDoS and phishing attacks. And we know that at the early April, there are some identity thefts taking place on the communication platform line. Originally, people were afraid that some deaf people, users, they could not hear the auditory notification, but some of the identities were stolen. But as you mentioned, this kind of joint defense needs to start from the bottommost infrastructure layer all the way to the application layer. But after that identity theft event online how has Taiwan Mobile gone about addressing several issues? Yes, on the first day of April, on the April Fool's Day, we know that we bought the voice mailbox services from Taiwan Star, but we didn't change the default login information, so users can still use their default login credentials to access the original voicemail. And some people say it has a lot to do with fraud. But just to clarify, on April Fool's Day, we actually switch off the default login credentials from Taiwan Star. So if the user can no longer log into their voicemail remotely using their default password, but it was still useless because we still receive a lot of complaints about fraud. So we approached the company line, the company's offices in Japan. So actually, there is a agent in SMS agent in Japan and also SMS agents in Taiwan. There are 5 parties involved for SMS to spread. You need to pay to send SMS, right? So actually each party will contribute to the cost structure. That is, every party across the chain will have access to the content of the SMS. There are 5 potential points of failure. So each of them said they are doing a good job, there's no information leak or breach, but we still receive a lot of complaints from different telco users. So we approached the company line. So first off, we encrypt the channel. We went about encrypting the channel. Each party thought they were doing fine, but they actually charged based on what was transmitted. So we required encryption of all the messages. And secondly, we talked to line. Well, you should have used Open Network API or other means for end-to-end transmission without skipping, so that you can skip 3 out of the 5 parties. So that's the case for OTP or one-time password. So we reached out to 5 parties around the world. We sat down and tried to address the problem. Thank you, Dr. Ke. We still have 2 minutes time, so I would like to ask each of the panelists for a concluding remark in about 1 minute, because we're talking about technical community and infrastructure capacity building in this session. So we talk a lot about the connectivity between different layers. So any concluding thoughts? 30 seconds, please. Starting from you, Alex. Yes, something to think about today is that in the era of AI, we know that AI has been able to provide you with answers almost immediately. But is that really helpful for the tech community? Do we really need answers that immediately? Will that undermine our learning capacity and our problem-solving capability and the build-up of knowledge? That is, in this highly automated era, how can a team made up with real human beings still maintain a positive learning attitude and the ability to understand questions? There's something to think about as a food for thought. Yes, AI is indeed a buzzword. How about Dr. Jia Wei Chen? Yes, AI is a double-edged sword. So it can lead to success and failure. So we can probably use AI to beat AI enemies in terms of, for example, dissemination of information. AI is definitely one of the trending topics of our time. We should ride the waves of AI and be ahead of AI rather than being taken over by AI. Yes, finally, Dr. Ke, yes, we need to define clear boundaries when it comes to governance. And to be resilient, we need to engage international joint defense. For example, ID, CDN, platform providers, users across borders should actually engage in joint defense. Thank you, Director Guo. I think we're joined by friends from Europe and the States. So that speaks to the importance of international collaboration. We know that GDPR in the EU imposes a lot of requirements on data protection. And in Taiwan, we also have been thinking about how to define clear boundaries and while engaging in international collaboration. With that, we close this session. Thank you.
主持这个场次，我们请科长还有我们的语坛讲者来一起合影一张。那请起身，稍微往中间移动一点，我们来拍一张大合照。So we will ask all the panelists and the moderator for a group photo to wrap up this session. 好，请看向我们的摄影师。好，再一张。好，我们再次掌声谢谢这个场次的所有的语坛讲者，还有我们的主持人，非常精彩的分享。Thank you very much for a very wonderful panel.